Alright everybody, this is the website boy again with another tutorial on PHP. Today we're going to be discussing about numbers, floating numbers, alright? The reason why we're talking about this is because on the last tutorial we talked about integers. And in programming language, in any programming language, you're going to find that the language itself handles floating numbers and integers very differently. Floating numbers usually require more memory, so they kind of handle, each programming language handles floating numbers a little different. All right. So let's go ahead and let's just start. Let me show you exactly. For those of you that don't know what a floating number, and most of you know what a floating number is, but there might be some of you that don't know. And let me just show you some functions also. Let's make a variable called float and let's assign it a floating number. In this case, it's gonna be 5 point, I don't know, 13. This is a floating number, right? Remember, an integer is a whole number, would be 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and anything with a decimal point place would be a floating number, right? So we have that here. Let's make another one, right? And let's call this, let's just add this one to, I don't know, an integer. So if I add this onto an integer and I refresh, let's just make a br tagging here so that way you can see it. All right. And if I add it, it handles it right. I mean, it adds it up and it handles the floating and it converts it, right, to a floating number, right? So it does work right. Now, let's do another one here. And this one, I want to actually divide 3 divided by 5 divided by 3, and that equals a floating number, as you can see. All right. Now, there's one important point that I want to make here. All right, you cannot divide by 0. So if you, for just, demonstration purposes only, if I wanted to divide 7 divided by 0 and I refresh, I get a warning right here. Division by 0, it's not allowed. All right, so we cannot do that. I wanted to show you that, all right, just in case. But later on we can actually make if statements and, you know um, prevent that from happening. So we'll say probably, if for some reason this number is 0, I don't want you to do that, I want you to do this. All right, so later on we'll deal with that. Let me show you some functions here that would handle floating points. First function I want to show you is the round, right, function, and that would take your variable, and then the second argument will be how many decimal points you wanted to get round, right? Then the next one after this would be the ceiling function. All right, I believe it's spelled like this, ceiling. And here would be something like this, seal. And then it doesn't take it just takes one argument. Let's make a br tagging here. All right, what this ceiling function is gonna do is gonna round everything up. All right, so if we have 5.13 there, right, and if I round it up, what do you think is gonna happen? Look at this, it rounds it up to 6, as you can see there, right? So it rounds it up. This one, the round function, grab my 5.13 there, all right, and round it up to 5.1. Round it to 5.1 because the 3 is closer to the 1, right? So it rounded up. Now let's look at another function here that is called floor, and this is very and floor is just the opposite of ceiling. Basically, it's gonna round it down. All right, so I'm just gonna copy. I don't like typing the whole thing again, and let's just floor. And if I go ahead and do that, refresh, it's gonna round it down to 5. Right, so it's grabbing the flow right here and it's rounding it to 5, and that one rounded up to 6. Right, now let's go ahead and let me show you one more function. All right, let's say for example, I have an integer, right? And I'm showing you this because later on when we start messing around with databases, we're gonna be using some of this stuff. So I want you to be aware of it. Let's say for example I have an integer here, a variable integer, and is a sits, right? It's an integer is a sits, and let's say let's make another PHP function here. Let's say I want to find out if float is a integer or a float. How do I find out? Well, PHP has a function for that. All right. So let's just put another BR tag here. Let me actually put another BR tag here and here. Right. That way. Okay. So let's say, for example, let's use, it's a method actually. It's not even a function, but it's kind of a function because it's a method. But later on, I'll show you what that means. But anyways, so the method is like this: is int, right? And then we take the variable and we put it right here. That is a function right there. So if we say that, we just got to echo it. All right. So we echo this whole thing. Echo. We say, and it gives a 1. So if it is an integer, it gives us a 1, which is a usually in all programming languages is a positive, a true statement. And if it's a 0, then it's false. All right. So if I use the same function there for a float, show you right now, br tag here, and I use it for float, right? Refresh. I don't get anything. It's not going to give me the 0, but just because it didn't give me anything, it means it's null, it's 0. All right. So that's the reason why it's not giving me anything there. All right. So there is another one also called is float. All right. So for example, if I want to find out this is a float, I refresh and it tells me that it's not, so it gives me a 0. But if I use a float, it should give me a 1. A 1, refresh, and it gives me a 1 because it's true. Okay. Now there's another one called numeric also, and this integer, I believe you can use it like this also, but it's actually more popular to use it as int instead of integer, because you can use it as that also. It gives you the same results. All right. I want you to be aware of these functions here because they're very useful, especially when you're doing some cool programming stuff. The round, the ceiling, and the floor are something that you're going to be using all the time. The int, we're going to be using it. The flow, I don't use it as much because if we find out this is not an integer, then we do something, we don't need to check for the flow. So I want you to be aware of that. If this is your first time watching my tutorials and you like them, subscribe to my channel so you can get more on your email. I also have a website called thewebsiteboy.com. You can Google it. I provide a lot of help there if you need any help with PHP or any programming language. And if you have a request for a tutorial, let me know. In my website, you can make the request. It's very simple. The link is in the bottom of this video. And if you need the exercise files, let me know. The link is in the bottom of this video too. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for your support, and I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye-bye.